Freedom is not what you think it is. You have been sold a lie, a pleasant fiction that tells you freedom means getting what you want, doing what you please, living without constraints. You chase this illusion your entire life, accumulating possessions, achievements, relationships, experiences, believing that the next acquisition will finally set you free. But the Stoics understood something that most people die without learning. True freedom has nothing to do with external circumstances and everything to do with internal acceptance. The path to liberation runs through 7 brutal truths, and most people lack the courage to face even one of them. These are not comfortable insights. They will not make you feel better about yourself. They will not validate your victim stories or excuse your failures. They are harsh, uncompromising realities that the ancient Stoics discovered through lives of extraordinary difficulty. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, betrayal, and the burden of empire. Epictetus endured slavery and physical disability. Seneca navigated political intrigue, exile, and ultimately forced suicide. These men were not armchair philosophers dispensing pleasant platitudes. They forged their wisdom in the furnace of real suffering, and what emerged was hard as diamond and just as valuable. The truths they discovered will shatter your illusions, but in the breaking, they will set you free. We live in an age of comfortable lies. We are told that we can have it all, that we deserve happiness, that the universe owes us fairness. We are encouraged to blame our circumstances, our parents, our trauma, our oppressors for every limitation in our lives. We are offered endless excuses for why we are not free, why we are not happy, why we are not living the lives we imagine we deserve. And these excuses are comfortable. They let us remain victims, powerless but blameless, suffering but morally superior. The Stoic truths demolish this comfort. They demand that you take full responsibility for your inner life, even when the external world is manifestly unjust. They insist that freedom is always available, but only to those brave enough to stop lying to themselves. What does it mean to accept a brutal truth? It means more than intellectual acknowledgement. You can know something with your mind while denying it with your life. Acceptance means integrating the truth so deeply that it changes how you move through the world. It means letting the reality reshape your expectations, your reactions, your entire orientation toward existence. It means giving up the stories you tell yourself about how things should be and dealing with how things actually are. This is painful work. Every brutal truth you accept requires the death of a cherished illusion. But the Stoics promise that on the other side of this death is a kind of life you cannot imagine from where you currently stand. The first brutal truth is this: most of your suffering is self-inflicted. Not all of it, but most of it. The external events of your life, the rejection, the loss, the disappointment, the injustice, these are real. But the suffering that extends beyond the moment of impact, the suffering that haunts you for days or years, the suffering that colors your entire experience of being alive, this suffering comes from your judgment about what happened, not from what happened itself. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by our views about things. A person dies, and death is neutral. But you judge that they should not have died, that it is terrible and unfair and unbearable, and this judgment creates your suffering. You lose a job, and the loss is a fact. But you judge that this loss means you are a failure, that your life is ruined, that you will never recover, and this judgment multiplies your pain 1,000-fold. This truth is brutal because it strips away your right to blame. If your suffering is self-inflicted through your judgments, then you cannot remain a victim of circumstances. You must take responsibility for the inner commentary that transforms neutral events into personal catastrophes. You must acknowledge that you are participating in your own suffering, often enthusiastically. This does not mean that what happened to you was okay. It does not minimize genuine injustice or trauma, but it draws a clear line between the event and your ongoing relationship with the event. The event is in the past and cannot be changed. Your judgment about the event is present and within your power to examine, challenge, and transform. Most people resist this truth with everything they have. They insist that their suffering is caused by what happened, not by their interpretation of what happened. They argue that if terrible things had not occurred, they would not be suffering. And in a superficial sense, this is true. But the Stoic is pointing to something deeper. Two people can experience the same event and have radically different relationships with it. One person is destroyed by rejection, another uses it as fuel for growth. One person is paralyzed by a loss, another finds meaning in it. The difference is not in the event but in the judgment, the meaning-making, the story constructed around the event. When you accept that most of your suffering is self-inflicted, a strange thing happens. You stop waiting for the world to change before you can be free. You stop demanding that others acknowledge your pain before you can release it. You stop insisting that justice must be served before you can move forward. Instead, you turn your attention to the only thing you can actually control, your own mind. You examine the judgments that are creating unnecessary suffering. You question the stories that keep you trapped in victimhood. You practice separating what happened from your interpretation of what it means. And slowly, painfully, you begin to loosen the grip of suffering that you yourself have been maintaining. The second brutal truth follows from the first. You are not entitled to anything. Not fairness, not happiness, not love, not success, not even life itself. The universe does not owe you good fortune. Other people do not owe you understanding. Your past efforts do not entitle you to future rewards. You were born into a world that operates according to its own laws, indifferent to your preferences, and you will leave this world the same way. Every good thing that comes to you is a gift, not a right. Every moment of peace is grace, not payment for services rendered. Every connection is freely given, not owed. This truth is brutal because it demolishes the victim mentality that so many of us use to make sense of our lives. If you are not entitled to anything, then you cannot be genuinely wronged when you do not receive what you wanted. You can be disappointed, yes. You can recognize injustice, absolutely. But you cannot maintain the stance of righteous victim, demanding restitution from an indifferent universe. Marcus Aurelius reflected constantly on the fact that he could die at any moment, that everything he had could be taken, that nothing was guaranteed beyond this present breath. This was not pessimism. This was clear-eyed realism that prevented him from developing expectations that would lead to unnecessary suffering. When you truly accept that you are not entitled to anything, gratitude becomes possible for the first time. As long as you believe the universe owes you happiness, every good thing that happens is simply the universe paying its debt. There is no gratitude in receiving what you are owed. But when you understand that you are owed nothing, that every moment of pleasure, every kindness from another person, every success you achieve is pure gift, gratitude floods in. You stop taking things for granted. You stop being outraged when things do not go your way. You become genuinely appreciative of whatever comes, because you recognize that it came freely, not because you earned it or deserved it. This does not mean you stop working toward goals or advocating for justice. It means you do these things without the entitled expectation that your efforts guarantee results. You do your best because that is what virtue requires, not because the universe has promised you success in exchange. You fight against injustice because it is right to do so, not because you are owed a just world. This subtle shift in orientation changes everything. You become free from the bitterness that comes from unmet expectations, free from the resentment of not receiving what you felt entitled to, free from the constant disappointment of a world that refuses to conform to your preferences. The third brutal truth: the people you love will hurt you, leave you, or die. There are no exceptions to this reality. Every relationship you cherish contains the seeds of loss. Your parents will age and decline, their minds and bodies betraying them. Your romantic partner will change over time, growing in directions you cannot predict or control. Your children will become strangers to you as they develop their own lives and values. Your friends will drift away as circumstances shift. And death waits at the end of every connection, ready to sever what you thought permanent. The Stoics did not say this to make you sad. They said it to make you free from the illusion of permanence that creates so much unnecessary suffering. Seneca wrote extensively about preparing for loss. He advocated a practice he called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. You deliberately imagine losing what you love, not to torture yourself but to recognize the temporary nature of all things. When you understand that everything is borrowed, that nothing belongs to you permanently, you relate to what you have with more wisdom. You appreciate it more deeply because you know it is fleeting. You hold it more lightly because you are prepared for its departure. You do not take it for granted because you have confronted the reality that it could vanish at any moment. This truth is brutal because it asks you to love fully while accepting impermanence. Most people oscillate between two dysfunctional extremes. Either they attach desperately to what they love, living in constant fear of loss, trying to control and possess what cannot be controlled or possessed. Or they detach prematurely, refusing to love deeply because they are afraid of the pain that loss will bring. The Stoic offers a third way: love completely, knowing that loss is inevitable. Open yourself fully to connection, while maintaining the wisdom that nothing lasts. This is extraordinarily difficult. It requires holding two seemingly contradictory truths simultaneously. This matters deeply, and this will end. But when you can do this, when you can love with full awareness of impermanence, you become free from the anxious clinging that poisons so many relationships. You stop trying to freeze time, to prevent natural change, to hold on to what is already slipping away. Instead, you become present to what is here now, savoring it precisely because you know it is temporary. You tell people you love them because you understand that the opportunity may not come again. You resolve conflicts quickly because you recognize that time is limited. You forgive more readily because you see how short life actually is. The awareness of loss, rather than paralyzing you with fear, liberates you to love more authentically. The fourth brutal truth: your comfort zone is a prison. Everything you want in life, growth, mastery, meaningful achievement, genuine self-respect, exists outside the boundaries of what feels comfortable. But your nervous system is designed to keep you safe, not to make you great. It will sabotage your aspirations to protect you from the discomfort of change. It will generate elaborate rationalizations for why you should stay small, stay safe, stay in the familiar territory of your current limitations. And if you listen to it, if you organize your life around avoiding discomfort, you will arrive at the end having never truly lived. The Stoics practiced voluntary discomfort as a form of training. Marcus Aurelius deliberately slept on hard surfaces and ate simple food, even though he could have surrounded himself with luxury. Epictetus taught his students to welcome hardship as an opportunity to practice virtue. Seneca periodically lived as if he had lost everything, eating the cheapest food and wearing rough clothing, rehearsing poverty so that he would not fear it. They understood that the soft life makes soft people, and soft people cannot withstand the inevitable difficulties that existence brings. They trained themselves to be comfortable with discomfort, and in doing so, they expanded the territory of what they could handle. This truth is brutal because it means that every time you choose comfort over growth, you are choosing to remain imprisoned. Every time you avoid a difficult conversation because it feels awkward, you sacrifice a piece of your integrity. Every time you skip the workout because you do not feel like it, you betray your commitment to yourself. Every time you stay in a situation that diminishes you because leaving would be uncomfortable, you choose slow death over the pain of rebirth. The excuses are always reasonable. You are tired, you have had a hard day, you will start tomorrow, you deserve to relax. And sometimes these excuses are legitimate, but most of the time, they are the prison bars you are constructing around yourself, one comfortable choice at a time. When you accept this truth, you begin to develop a different relationship with discomfort. Instead of seeing it as something to avoid, you start to recognize it as a signal that you are growing. You learn to distinguish between the discomfort of genuine harm and the discomfort of expansion. You practice leaning into the things that scare you, not recklessly but deliberately, building your capacity to handle difficulty. You understand that freedom is not found in a life without challenges, but in developing yourself into someone capable of meeting any challenge. The comfort zone shrinks you. Discomfort expands you, and you must choose, every single day, which direction you will move. The fifth brutal truth: you cannot control outcomes, only your efforts. This might seem obvious intellectually, but very few people actually live according to this reality. We tie our sense of self-worth to results that depend on countless factors beyond our control. We suffer when we do our best and still fail. We become arrogant when we succeed, forgetting the role that luck and circumstance played. We waste enormous energy trying to control what cannot be controlled, and neglect the one thing that is always within our power: the quality of our own actions. Epictetus taught his students to focus entirely on what is within their control and to become completely indifferent to what is not. Within your control: your judgments, your intentions, your efforts, your responses to circumstances. Outside your control: other people's opinions, the results of your actions, your reputation, whether you succeed or fail, whether you are loved or hated, whether you live or die. When you internalize this distinction, your entire relationship with stress changes. You stop feeling anxious about outcomes because you recognize that they were never yours to control. You start feeling empowered about your efforts because you realize that this is the one domain where you are sovereign. This truth is brutal because it requires you to give up the illusion of control that makes you feel safe. We desperately want to believe that if we just work hard enough, plan carefully enough, worry intensely enough, we can guarantee the results we want. But life does not work that way. You can do everything right and still lose. You can prepare perfectly and still fail. You can be virtuous and still suffer. The Stoic response is not to give up trying, but to redefine success. Success is not achieving the outcome you wanted. Success is acting with virtue regardless of outcome. Success is doing your absolute best and then releasing attachment to the results. When you live this way, you become immune to both crushing defeat and corrupting victory. If your self-worth is tied to effort rather than outcome, then failure cannot destroy you. You did your best, circumstances went against you, and that is simply how life works sometimes. You learn what you can and you try again. Similarly, success cannot make you arrogant if you recognize how much of it was outside your control. You did your part well, and you were fortunate in the variables you could not control. You accept the success gratefully without believing that it proves your superiority or guarantees future results. The sixth brutal truth: time is running out, and you are wasting most of it. You have a finite number of days, hours, minutes on this earth. You do not know how many. It could be decades or it could be hours. But whatever the number, it is limited, and every moment you spend on trivialities is a moment you will never get back. The Stoics were obsessed with mortality, not morbidly but practically. They understood that awareness of death is what gives life urgency and meaning. When you truly comprehend that you will die, that everyone you love will die, that all of this is temporary, you stop wasting time on things that do not matter. Seneca wrote that we are not given a short life, but we make it short by wasting most of it. We spend hours scrolling through feeds that make us feel worse about ourselves. We invest energy in conflicts that will not matter in a month. We postpone important conversations, meaningful work, necessary changes, acting as if we have unlimited time to get around to what actually matters. We live as if death is a distant abstraction rather than a present reality. And then one day we wake up and realize that decades have passed, and we have spent them in service to other people's priorities, other people's opinions, other people's definitions of success. This truth is brutal because it requires you to confront how much of your life you have already wasted and to make difficult choices about how you will spend what remains. It means saying no to things that other people expect of you but that do not align with your values. It means disappointing people who want you to stay small so they feel better about staying small themselves. It means taking risks that comfortable people will judge as foolish. It means living as if each day might be your last, because one of them will be, and you will not get a warning about which one. When you accept this truth, you develop a fierce prioritization. You stop attending events you do not care about out of obligation. You stop maintaining relationships that drain you without adding value. You stop doing work that does not serve your growth or contribute to something meaningful. You become ruthlessly protective of your time because you understand that it is the one resource you cannot replenish. People will call you selfish. Let them. You know something they have not yet learned. That wasting your life trying to please others is the ultimate selfishness, a betrayal of the potential that was entrusted to you. The seventh and most brutal truth: you are going to die, possibly without having lived. This is different from knowing intellectually that death is inevitable. This is confronting the possibility that you will reach the end of your life having never truly been alive, having spent your days in comfortable numbness, having traded the possibility of greatness for the security of mediocrity. The Stoics distinguished between merely existing and actually living. Existing is what most people do. They follow the script, meet the expectations, avoid discomfort, seek pleasure, and die having never asked whether there was another way. Living is something else entirely. It is waking up to the reality of your situation, accepting the brutal truths we have explored, and making the difficult choice to live according to virtue regardless of cost. Marcus Aurelius had a practice of imagining himself on his deathbed, looking back on his life. From that vantage point, what would matter? The opinions of critics? The accumulation of wealth? The social status he had achieved? Or the quality of his character, the integrity of his actions, the degree to which he had lived according to his principles? This practice created clarity. It helped him distinguish the essential from the trivial, the permanent from the temporary, the real from the illusory. He asked himself regularly, if this were my last day, would I be content with how I spent it? And when the answer was no, he changed his behavior. This truth is brutal because it demands that you live with intention rather than default. It requires that you define what a life well lived means to you, not based on cultural programming or social expectations, but based on your deepest understanding of virtue and meaning. And then it requires that you actually live that way, day after day, even when it is hard, even when no one is watching, even when easier paths are available. Most people cannot do this. They know what they should do, what would make them proud of themselves, what would constitute actual living rather than mere existence. But they choose comfort, convenience, the path of least resistance. And they die with their potential unrealized, their truths unspoken, their lives unlived. When you accept all 7 of these brutal truths, something extraordinary happens. The weight of illusion lifts. The exhausting performance of trying to control what cannot be controlled ends. The desperate seeking of what you are not entitled to ceases. The anxious clinging to what is temporary relaxes. The comfortable prison of the familiar opens. The attachment to outcomes dissolves. The pretense that you have unlimited time evaporates. What remains is stark, clear, and profoundly free. You are here, now, for a brief time. You cannot control most of what happens to you, but you can control your response to everything. You are not owed happiness, success, love, or fairness, which means every moment of peace is pure grace. The people you love will leave or die, which means every interaction is precious. Growth requires discomfort, which means you must choose pain or stagnation. Results are outside your control, which means your only job is excellent effort. Time is running out, which means you must live now or accept that you may never live at all. And you will die, possibly without having truly lived, which means the choice is urgent and the stakes are absolute. These truths do not make life meaningless. They make it meaningful in the only way that matters, by stripping away the comfortable lies that keep you asleep and presenting you with the raw reality of your situation. You are a conscious being with the capacity for choice, placed temporarily in a world you did not design and cannot control, given the opportunity to respond with virtue or vice, courage or cowardice, wisdom or foolishness. How will you respond? The Stoics answer: with acceptance of what is, with effort toward what should be, with virtue regardless of outcome, with wisdom in the face of uncertainty, with courage despite fear, with love despite impermanence, with full engagement despite the knowledge of death. This is freedom, not the freedom to get what you want, but the freedom that comes from no longer being enslaved by wanting. Not the freedom from difficulty, but the freedom that comes from developing yourself into someone capable of meeting any difficulty. Not the freedom from death, but the freedom that comes from accepting mortality so fully that it can no longer be used to manipulate you. This is what the brutal truths offer: liberation through acceptance of reality as it is, not as you wish it were. The practice begins immediately. You do not wait until you feel ready or until circumstances improve. You start with whatever situation you find yourself in right now. You examine the suffering you are experiencing and ask honestly, how much of this am I creating through my judgments? You notice the places where you feel entitled and practice gratitude instead. You look at your relationships with clear eyes, appreciating them fully while accepting their impermanence. You do something uncomfortable today, something that makes you grow even though it would be easier to stay small. You focus your energy on your efforts rather than results you cannot control. You audit how you spent the last week and ask whether that is how you want to spend the weeks you have remaining. You confront the possibility that you might die without having lived and make one choice today that moves you toward actually living. This is not easy work. Every brutal truth you accept requires the death of an illusion you are using to make yourself comfortable. Your nervous system will fight you. Your conditioning will offer 1,000 reasons why you should wait, why these truths do not apply to you, why you are different, why you deserve an exception. The people around you who are still asleep will try to pull you back into the dream, because your waking reminds them that they are sleeping. You will fail repeatedly, falling back into comfortable lies, reverting to old patterns. This is normal. This is expected. This is part of the practice. The Stoics were not perfect. Marcus Aurelius struggled with anger and had to remind himself constantly to practice patience. Epictetus had students who frustrated him with their unwillingness to learn. Seneca made compromises that he later regretted. They were human, subject to the same weaknesses and temptations as everyone else. But they practiced. They returned to the truths again and again. They examined their failures without excuse but also without self-destruction. They kept walking the path even when they stumbled, because they understood that the alternative, remaining asleep, remaining comfortable, remaining enslaved to illusion, was a kind of death. You have the same choice. You can continue living according to comfortable lies. That your suffering is caused by circumstances, that you are entitled to fairness, that relationships are permanent, that you can stay comfortable and still grow, that you can control outcomes, that you have unlimited time, that you can postpone actually living until some future moment when conditions are better. These lies will keep you comfortable right up until the moment you die, and then it will be too late to choose differently. Or you can accept the brutal truths. You can take responsibility for the suffering you create through your judgments. You can release entitlement and embrace gratitude. You can love fully while accepting impermanence. You can choose discomfort and growth over comfort and stagnation. You can focus on effort rather than outcomes. You can treat your time as the precious resource it is. You can live now, fully, completely, as if this day might be your last, because one day you will be right. The Stoics offer you this choice without sugarcoating it, without promising that acceptance of these truths will make you happy in the way you imagine happiness. They promise something different and better, that acceptance of these truths will make you free. Free from the tyranny of unmet expectations, free from the prison of comfort, free from the slavery of attachment to outcomes, free from the delusion of unlimited time, free from the fear of death because you are actually living. This freedom is available right now, not in some distant future after you have achieved your goals or fixed your problems. It is available the moment you accept reality as it is and choose to respond with virtue. The world rages with injustice, loss, suffering, and death. But the Stoic stands in the middle of this chaos, clear-eyed and calm, not because they are indifferent but because they are free. They have accepted the brutal truths that most people spend their entire lives running from. They have made peace with reality, and in that peace, they have found the only freedom that cannot be taken. The freedom that comes from needing nothing that circumstances can provide or remove. The freedom that comes from living according to virtue regardless of outcome. The freedom that comes from being fully alive in the only moment that exists, which is now. If you are ready to stop lying to yourself, to accept reality however brutal, to choose freedom over comfort, subscribe and walk this path with us. The brutal truths wait for no one, but they liberate all who are brave enough to face them. The Stoics proved that freedom is possible, even in chains, even in exile, even facing death. Now it is your turn to prove it in your own life, in your own way, one brutal truth at a time.